what is up with this algorithm? Like, the ratio of men to women, of diversity to non-diversity, like visible diversity is just so off. And so I was like, okay, where are all the female athletes? I have like one follower, okay? And I posted on my story, send out an organic text message, and I was like, current and former collegiate female athletes, please fill out this survey. And it was like really invasive questions, okay? So I did this 9 months ago now, and the data was insane.
As you know, we use this platform to share stories of resilience. And today I have a very special guest. Hey everybody, welcome again to the Sally Allen podcast. I'm so glad you're here because I'm excited about our guest today. Her name is Stephanie Barrett, and believe it or not, I've only met with her once. But I've been following her progress on LinkedIn, and I absolutely love what she stands for, and I just love the way she positioned herself as a leader. So we will go a little bit into leadership, excited to share that with you, and some new initiatives that she has started. Stephanie Barrett, I want to welcome you to the Sally Allen podcast.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I feel so honored. Hearing about all the things you've done since that initial meeting, what we decided 5 years ago, is incredible to see all the impact that you're making across the economy and the country is pretty profound. So congratulations on all of that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. But I want to properly introduce you. Let's see. I don't do good at reading, but I'm gonna do this right. Stephanie is a mama first, a wife, and she's also the head of division support for a finance team at this company that her and I used to work at. So pretty incredible at what you're doing. She's also, I'm so excited about this. This is one of the reasons I asked her to be on the podcast. She started this initiative. She's the founder of Her Competitive Advantage, and she will tell us more about that later. But for now, I just want to properly welcome you and say, welcome to the Sally Allen podcast again.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see what we're going to chat about today.
Yeah. So I think when I met you 5 years ago, I just was so drawn to your personality. You just seemed so kind, and you were a beauty queen before, and I thought, how does a beauty queen go from, right? You were Miss Nevada in 2007. How do you go from a beauty queen to the corporate environment?
Yeah, I mean, my road to corporate was probably a lot different than most people. So I was a collegiate female athlete. I played Division I basketball at Arizona State just for a year. I was injured and also probably had a lot of growing up to do in those moments as well, and finished my schooling elsewhere. But after I graduated, my husband actually was a college women's basketball coach. So we were traveling the world. I was a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 kids. They're incredible. Actually, I brought my daughter with me today for International Women's Day. So she's here and seeing all of this unfold, which I think is really important. But so while my husband was coaching college basketball, our youngest, so he was 4.5 months old at the time, and I won't go into too many of the details because I don't want to cry and be emotional, but while I was a stay-at-home mom, he was like struggling to breathe. We were being life-flighted to Children's constantly. It was 2 hours away. Every day was like, is he going to live or die? And it was just really such a difficult time in our life because my husband was kind of coaching, kind of not. He was, in between hospital visits, showing up for a game. And in July, our research doctor was like, look, we don't know what's going on. We did a lung biopsy at 4.5 months old, tested him for lung disease. He doesn't have it. We thought for sure he did. So I think you guys need to move somewhere dry and warm because another 8-month winter out here in Pennsylvania, 2 hours away from Children's Hospital, is just not going to be a good environment. And where we lived, right, like the local ERs, we're in a small town. So they knew how to handle colds and flus, but with my son's situation, it was like we would arrive and they'd be like, how much do you guys weigh? A helicopter's on the way or an ambulance based on weather. So it was a lot to unpack. And I remember telling my husband, because with college coaching, it's really seasonal hires, right? Like when the season's over, they do all the hiring. And so there wasn't anything open in July, let alone anything that met that dry and warm requirement. And so I remember telling my husband, I have a degree. Let me see if I can find a job. And I'm like when I tell you we're driving across the country and I'm interviewing on the side of the road, you know those buildings on the side of a freeway?
Yeah.
That's where I was interviewing
Oh my
with like
gosh.
3 kids in the back of the car, one with an oxygen tank, 2 other kids. And I was like, please, I hope they can't hear all these cars whizzing by like 20 feet from me. And we ended up in Vegas and got my first job. And the first few years were rough. Like transitioning from being a stay-at-home mom or any traumatic situation to something where you don't really have a choice on is really hard, but also really empowering. And so the first couple of years were rough. I remember crying every day. And I'm not really a crier, but I was like every day crying. My kids were crying. And I kind of got to a point where it was like, I'm going to have to work regardless. We are where we are. And I can like go all in and try and do amazing things and get paid a lot more for it and have a lot more fulfillment, or I can just be really upset every single day at work. And I obviously picked the first one and have had a lot of really great mentors and people who have bet on me, which was amazing. But back to your question on beauty pageant, how I got into that, because when my son was sick, we spent so much time at the Ronald McDonald House. And before that instance, I actually didn't really understand what the Ronald McDonald House was. I remember going in there and being, to McDonald's or whatever and seeing something people would drop coins and I'm like, what is this? But when we actually lived there for weeks at a time, and this charity that was connected to the hospital cut my kids' hair, put on Valentine's Day activities, gave us some sort of normalcy, because you show up and you don't know how long you're going to be there. I can't like plan for my kid's haircut. You get there and a few weeks in, you're like, dang, my kids are looking rough. So what they did for me was so unbelievable. And pageantry was really started out as a way to give back to that charity with a very unique platform. And so we volunteered for the Ronald McDonald House all over the world, including in Italy, which was my absolute favorite, with my family. And so I think being able to do something for them and highlight their brand and all that they do for so many other people was something I couldn't pass up on.
Wow, that speaks of your heart, giving back. You recognize the value, but you also recognize that giving back is so powerful. Yeah. So that job you came into, is that the job you're currently at?
So I've had a lot of jobs in between that. So I got hired at Scientific Games, which is now Light & Wonder. Spent a few years there. I loved it. Loved all the people that I worked with. Had a lot of really great bosses and mentors. And 2 years in, I was up for a second promotion. And I got a call from someone on LinkedIn. And they were like, hey, I want to interview you for a role. It's out in Pahrump. Are you interested? And I was like, I don't know if anyone knows where Pahrump is, but it's like an hour away from Las Vegas. And remember, I have three young kids that I'm already like, oh, I don't really want to give up my time with them. And I literally remember telling him, like, I'll come interview with you, like, fine to meet you, but I don't really care how much you pay me. I'm absolutely not driving to Pahrump every day.
Right.
So I went out for an interview, and speaking of the importance of allyship and people who see potential in you before you see it in them, is this person. And I'm still so close with him today. He's been my executive coach. I've worked consulting with him. He is one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met. But I remember going into that interview and interviewed, went to leave. He called me the next day and he's like, hey, we really want to hire you. Are you interested? What's your number? All of that. And I remember I was like, I'm kind of up for a promotion. I'm really not going to drive to Pahrump. I already told him. So I'm going to throw out something crazy. And I did. I threw out something insane, 185% of what I was currently making.
Wow.
And he was like, well, why do you think you're worth that? And I told him some dumb answer, right? That I thought was really good. I thought it was so good, being 2 years into work and a mom and like trying to put all the pieces together. And I literally remember him clear as day. We laugh about this all the time. He says to me, Steph, I'm actually not going to go tell our CEO that. What I am going to tell him is X, Y, and Z, and this is why I think you're worth it. And I'll let you know what he says. 5 minutes later, he calls me back, and he's like, done. Put in your 2 weeks notice, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. I was like, what about background? And like, I've never even done drugs, but like, should I be concerned? Did I eat a poppy seed? I don't know. Like, it was just, I wasn't quite ready for that. And he was like, no, if you want to do this, like, take a leap of faith and do it. We're betting on you. You need to bet on us. And I remember, my mom's like she was with the same company 30 plus years, but crushed it. And was such an inspiration to me. And I was at her house when all this was happening. We went for a vacation and she was like, I've never heard of this company. I've never heard of a company that's willing to like pay so much. And I've never heard about someone who was like putting in 2 weeks notice prior to like actually clearing everything.
Yeah.
And she was like, I totally wouldn't do it. And I was like, all right, I think I'm going to do it. And I did it. And it was honestly probably one of the best decisions of my life. Like this relationship with the person who hired me, his name's Steve Morrison. So shout out to Steve.
Steve.
Thanks,
Hi,
Steve. He, his belief in me and ability to see potential when I couldn't has really been has affected me in such a way that I could never fully repay him for, right? Like he gave me a leg up in such a unique way, not just financially, but he empowered me in so many ways. And it's amazing what can happen when we hire on potential and we empower people to go execute.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that. I believe like allyship is so important.
Yeah.
Right? Especially we're talking about International Women's Day. And it's so instrumental to us somewhere. I feel like those men that has come alongside us. But we'll go back to that. I want to go back to you being a mom and having to go back to work. There are women in situations like that, and they have to do it. What encouragement would you give them? Because it was so hard for you. You were crying, your kids are crying. How did you get through that?
I think it's just do it. Like, honestly, what you do as a stay-at-home mom or a mom, period, is a million times harder than anything you'll ever do in corporate America. Like, and I think we have this skewed view of what is actually things that we can learn versus things that we've earned, right? Like these lessons about emotional grittiness that we've earned being a mom. Our ability to negotiate with terrorists in a way, right? Like I always joke around chatting, like arguing with a toddler is like, has to be somewhat similar. I've never negotiated with a terrorist, but I'm assuming it would be something similar. I'm like, if you can do that, negotiating with your boss, who's a reasonable human being, is significantly easier. And so it's like, when you focus on these transferable skills and all that you've earned throughout an experience, it is so empowering to then be able to translate that into work. And when you really open your eyes while you're there to how these things are translating, you can learn Excel. I can teach you how to make a pivot table.
Wow. This is gold.
Yeah.
This is gold. I have to tell you, this is gold, because I think what you were talking about is, as a mom, it sounds like you've learned the skill of communication. Because communication is so important.
Yeah.
And if you understand how to communicate to your kids, and you can get them, especially a toddler, you can get them to do what you want them to do. Those skills, because in the workplace, those are skills we look for. Communication skills, high emotional intelligence skills, self-awareness, social awareness. So gold. Yeah. So, okay, so you transfer those skills. So what I'm hearing you say is that any mom who's, they have to leave their kids now and go out in the workplace, you're saying harness those skills that you learn with your kids.
Yeah, and just do it. Your kids are watching. They're so proud of you.
Yeah.
They don't care what you're doing. They don't care what your job title is. They're proud that you show up every single day for them. And I think there's so much power in that. Like when we really think about why we care about success, why we want to be successful, it's probably not for money. Right. And if it is, then you're probably not in it for the right reasons. And so, yes, money is great and it is a transactional means to solve a lot of problems. But there's so much more to success in life and your why that becomes so much more powerful. And so when you can harness those things, I think we're unstoppable. And moms are incredible. Like they're women in general, people in general. I mean, everybody's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. So coming back to, we were talking about International Women's Day, and I actually did a printout on this because I didn't want to get it wrong. I had a guest who had 4 pages of notes. It's so cute. So I did a printout of this. Like, allyship refers to the action, behaviors, and practices that a leader take to support and amplify and advocate for others, especially individuals who don't belong in the same social identity, gender groups as themselves. And I think it's so important to have allyships in our life, have allies. Talk to me about, I know you talk about one person who has helped you in your career. Talk to me about other allies who has helped you and how that has propelled you to where you are today.
Yeah, I've been so fortunate to have some pretty unbelievable bosses. I'll highlight my current boss right now. His name's Alex. Shout out, Alex. Hey.
Hey, Alex.
Having a boss who's willing to empower you is one of the most impactful things that you can experience as an employee, right? When they're able to bring out the best in you and put you in situations that you may not normally have access to,
Yeah.
There's so much value in that, and there's so much empowerment in it. Hector Fernandez, we both know, who's also incredible. He made me read this book early on in my time at Aristocrat, and it was called Pi. I think it's like from 1970, okay? Like, I was like, thank you, Hector, for the riveting book. But actually, I learned so much from this book. So what it talks about is 10% of your success is based on performance. So that's the P.
Right.
But it's like the leg of a table. If it's not there,
That's right.
the table can't even stand up. So you have to be able to execute and do that. The next part was image. And so your image is like 60% of your ability to succeed. So what people actually think of you, not what you're actually doing.
Right.
And then exposure being that last 30%, and the E of Pi being what rooms are you being brought into that you normally wouldn't be? What opportunities are you being given that you normally wouldn't have? Because, corporate America is really funny, right? We hire only on accolades. Like, what have you done? Show me your resume. What are your 3 bullets? And when you really think about what we're missing out on, is all that potential. That's hard to articulate on a resume.
Right.
That's hard to capture those transferable skills from being a mother or an athlete or whatever the case may be. Whatever hardship you've gone through that you've learned from and earned from. Like, when you have people that are willing to take you on that journey, that's where we're going to start to see movement as far as equality goes. And, the funny thing about equality is we all pay for it. And when we think we don't, that's where we're like our first mistake, right? When people are like, oh, that seems like a female problem or any other disparaged market. No, we all pay for it.
That's right.
And so it's in all of our best interest to lift everybody up, propel them in ways, give them exposure to things that they normally wouldn't have. And something I tell my team every single week, probably in our team meetings, the most underrated skill, in my opinion, in corporate America and actually in life, is saying good things about other people, both when they're there, but almost more importantly, when they're not
there. I love that.
And so it's, how do we do more of that for our people, for the people that we associate with?
Yeah.
What are the things that we're empowering them with? Because when it gets back to them that, oh, hey, Sally just told me that you helped her on this project and it was incredible.
Right.
And then you're like, oh my gosh, I loved working with her. She was, it's such an empowering thing. And I think it's good for business. It's good for people, and it's really good for business.
I think so too. I have to tell you, one of the things I did, we met only once. We worked together for a couple of years after that, but didn't realize. But one of the things I've done really well, and I didn't know I was doing. Yeah. Because if I knew, I would have harnessed that skill.
Like I would have leveraged that one.
I build bridges behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So when someone's, for example, my boss that I was working for, if his direct report is feeling a certain way about him or whatever, I build bridges by saying, he thinks highly of you. Yeah. I'm not lying. He does. He just doesn't tell you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I build the bridges that way. And it has had a remarkable impact on the teams that we work with.
Yeah.
So coming back to allyship also, what you didn't know behind the scenes, you were seeing me doing the coaching and the leadership training.
Yeah.
I was doing that because my boss, Rich, was empowering me to do that.
Yeah.
He actually paid for lunch every Friday so people would come to the class. We didn't have any training back then, what we were doing. And he wanted his team to be developed. So he said the best way to bring people in is buy food.
Free food.
Free
Nothing
food.
brings people
lunch.
together like some free food.
And that's where I started my leadership training. And then I asked those guys, I'm going to train you all. And I was terrible at I was so terrible at training. And I got feedback over and over. It was really hard to get to receive feedback. I learned also to receive feedback graciously. But I got feedback over and over and over again. And it was 90% men in that room.
Yeah.
90% men, and they continuously give me feedback. And then eventually I got good at what I was doing. I'm doing it now. So I think it's so important to recognize that when you're not in the room, who's talking about you? So that comes to my question. How do you position yourself? I know you're at a level where you're able to position yourself with the leaders. For someone at a lower level in the business who has layers in between them, how do they position themselves so that when they're not in the room, people are talking about them. People get to know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, early in your career, there's a lot of insecurities that happen, right? Where you're sitting around thinking, man, does that executive actually want to talk with me? And I'm going to tell you a really funny story. So I start working, right, and I'm super emotional going to work every day. It was really hard. And our CFO, Christine Taylor, shout out Christine, she's also incredible. I remember I was like, I was used to coaches, right? I played college sports. I'm like, I need a coach. I don't have one. I feel like that's important. How do I go about doing this? And when I was at Scientific Games, or now Light and Wonder, the executives all had offices. And so sometimes the door would be open, sometimes shut. And I remember thinking, I've got to ask her to be my mentor. Like, I have to. And I was like, I'm so scared. I like, how do I go about this? And I remember calling my mom on the way home, because she's been a mentor for me in a lot of ways. And I was like, Mom, I think I need to ask Christine if she can be my mentor. And she was like, do it. And it's like having people in your corner who are like, just do it. Don't be scared is so empowering as well. I feel like that's going to be the word of this episode, is like empowerment or something. But I remember, so the next day I'm like watching her door. I'm like, when is that thing going to open? She finally opens it and I'm like, well, do I rush in now? Do I wait? Is she just ended the meeting? Is this a good time? And so I walk in and I was like, Christine, do you have a minute? And she's like, sure, what's up? And so I sit down and I was like, can you be my mentor? Like, no hi, like nothing, okay? And she's like, of course. And I was like, okay, thanks. And I left, like totally left. And then I was like, oh shoot, I never coordinated, like, when are we meeting? What is happening? And, I think when we realize executives are just people.
People, that's right.
And being able to connect with them, even on things unrelated to work. Like, they're in work mode all day.
Yeah.
When you can talk to them about the grocery store instead of the next business strategy, there's connection and power in that as well. And I've been shot down plenty of times asking people to be my mentor. I remember very distinctively, I'm not gonna tell you who it was who shot me down. I remember going up to them and I was like, hey, I think you're so amazing because of X, Y, and Z. Like, can we grab lunch? Or I'd love to like hear more about your story. And I remember this person, also a female, was literally like, I'm really busy. And I was like, all right. So I made it my mission. I was like, I'm gonna connect with this person. Like, I feel like they're great. I don't think that's who they are. And so I tried really hard. And, every time I see this person now, we have such a weird connection. Like, any group setting, somehow we're always talking. And they probably don't remember that situation. Maybe they didn't even realize I was actually asking them. It was like in passing in the hallway. Maybe they didn't even realize what was happening.
Maybe they were having a bad day also.
Totally. Yeah. And so it's like giving people grace, even if they say no, or trying to understand, they have good intentions. They're not doing it maliciously. Maybe they're just super busy. Maybe it's a time in their life where they have other personal things going on. And, I think just having more confidence in who you are, like, you can do it. You're going to look back, I promise you, if you put in the time and the effort, you're going to look back and be like, I wish I would have had more confidence sooner. That's like the one thing I hear, especially with females, when they think about what could I have done better earlier in my career. It's be more confident, because you were so amazing then and you are amazing now.
Yeah. And it takes, especially when you start a new business, it takes a minute to build that confidence, because you're trying to prove yourself to people. But I get what you're saying. What I heard you said was, in order to position yourself in a way so that when you are not in the room, people are talking about you positively. Yeah. You have to be brave and go out there and talk to the leaders.
Yeah. And be positive. People love to be around positive people.
Right. Exactly.
That is, it just is a fact, right? If you want people to say nice things about you, be positive.
Be positive. Yeah.
I'm not saying be fake. I'm not saying be who you're not. Be who you are, but find positivity. Right. People crave that, especially in today's world. People crave those interactions. And so I think being more positive, intentionally connecting with people is so powerful. I'm going to tell you a story today. I got a text message from someone, Melissa Adams. Shout out Melissa Adams. She texted me and said, Happy International Women's Day with a nice note. Yeah. And, I didn't even really think about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so incredible that she took 5 minutes out of her day to write this nice message to me. And I immediately went and sent it to every woman, like, not that same message, obviously. It was like a personalized message to all the women who have impacted me. It doesn't say Happy International Women's Day just to people in corporate America. It's Happy International
Women's
Day, period. Yeah. Like, right? So I'm like messaging women that I know that don't work in corporate America, who I think are amazing moms, who I think are amazing people in general. And, I hope that it creates a tidal wave. I hope what Melissa did for me and then me passing it along and paying it forward made other people's days just a little bit brighter, right?
Yeah.
And I think that ability, and this is why I love holidays, right? Like
Yeah.
the 4th of July, you remember all the people who have fought for your freedom.
Right.
Christmas, if you're religious, you remember Jesus's birth, or if you're not, family, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And so, you know what I love about International Women's Day is it's a moment to reflect on how incredible women are.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in the hustle and bustle of life, we forget.
Yeah.
And I think women are pretty amazing.
And I think we need to stop looking at them as just, I love when you introduce yourself. You introduce yourself as a mom first.
Yeah.
You wear so many different hats. And to remember that we have always so much going on, not just as a corporate executive or work in the corporate world, but there is so many more hats that women wear. But I love your text because I sent it to about 25 women this morning at 7 a.m. and 5 of those came back and said, I really needed to hear this today.
Yeah.
And that was so impactful to hear them say that because I was just, this is what I do. I'm always the one starting stuff like this.
Yeah.
So this is what I do. So to hear 5 people come back and say, man, I really needed to hear this today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was so powerful. So I think it's so important, to your point, to recognize each other that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes, you know what? We don't have anybody telling us we're doing a good job.
Yep.
Yeah. So to be able to tell each other that is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what you do. You started a new initiative, and I don't have my notes here. Her competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh. I am so excited about it, first of all. I think when I think about how do we fix gender inequity and pay parity, and first of all, I want to be clear, like diversity is so much more than visible things, right? So we're looking at one component of it, but diversity in general is so much more than what you can see. But in this space specifically with gender inequities, you know, I was a former collegiate female athlete, and as I've progressed in my career, I kind of started looking around like, man, where are all the female athletes? And as I started hiring, and we have a great HR team at Aristocrat, but I think waiting for people to apply for jobs is kind of like watching paint dry. And then you wait a month and you're like, wait, who applied for this role? You know, so sometimes I do my own sourcing. And when I would search in LinkedIn, I'm like, what is up with this algorithm? Like the ratio of men to women, of diversity to non-diversity, like visible diversity is just so off. And so I was like, okay, where are all the female athletes? And I literally posted a survey, okay, to my social media. I have like no followers. This is not cool. I don't have 100,000 followers where everyone's like, oh, yay. Like I have like 1 follower, okay? And I posted on my story, send out an organic text message, and I was like, current and former collegiate female athletes, please fill out this survey. And it was like really invasive questions, okay? Did you graduate without a job? What's your highest level of education? What was your first salary? What's your current salary? What's your job title? Like a lot of things people don't actually want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then the last question was, would you be willing to be part of a case study? So I did this 9 months ago now, and the data was insane. Okay, 75%. And I would say my demographic is actually over-indexed. And I only left it open for 24 hours. I had 135 responses, which was pretty crazy given the organic nature of it, and how like invasive these questions were, not just like, hey, what's your favorite color? 75% of collegiate female athletes are graduating without a job today. The national average is 4%.
Wow.
And by the way, that demographic, 60% of them had a master's degree or higher. So there's like huge disparity going on, and I could unpack for an hour sitting here why all the reasons this happens. But Business Insider just came out with an article that said, if you graduate unemployed or underemployed from college, you will be underemployed you will be underemployed for at least 10 years. And I think their study only spanned 10 years, so I think that's why that was their number. But it's like, okay, we have this demographic who Ernst & Young says 94% of C-suite females played competitive sports and over half at the collegiate level. So there's something to these athletes who get there.
Right.
We just need more of them getting there.
Right.
So I started to understand, like, in these case studies, why this was happening. And I'm calling it the lost years. So what happens, right? You have clear direction, a coach, all your passion directed adequately. You've been hunted or recruited your whole life. And then overnight, that essentially all disappears. And you have to go hunt. You don't even know what you're hunting for.
Yeah.
And it's just a mess. There's a lot of mental health implications. And the length of your lost years is 100% dependent on how quickly you can become obsessed with something else.
Yeah.
Because female athletes need to be obsessed with something. And, you know, as I started uncovering this, the one thing that I universally heard outside of everybody's experience the last years, if you've been a female athlete, was that they all thought that they were the only one.
Oh, yeah.
So, when you have all of this success for so long, and then your first real form of failure where you don't actually have to show up for practice the next day after losing a game, right? It's this like solo failure. You kind of go into self-isolation, which is the worst form of punishment in prison, right? What do they do if you...
And bad for your mental health.
It's so bad. It's so bad. And so we're throwing our first event in Portland just before tip-off of the Women's Basketball Sweet 16 on March 29th, which I'm so excited about, where we're actually going to highlight a lot of these things, talk about the lost years. People are going to share their stories of, their experience within the lost years, and that, yes, I made it out and here's how. So we can better prepare this next generation of female athletes to be able to also have more success, right? Because if you think about what happens from an income loss perspective, from a retirement loss perspective, in those early years is so hard to catch up. Yeah, I'm estimating it will cost them over $2 million across their career.
Wow.
So
let me see if I understand. The purpose of it is, one, definitely let the athletes know they're not alone.
Yep.
They're not alone. But the other purpose is, are you educating them, helping them get jobs?
Yeah. So the secondary part is that educational component, but also we're working on a platform so recruiters can actually adequately find them.
Okay.
Because they're all going to school across the country, not really where they actually grew up, and they may not want to work where they go to school, whereas most people who go to school at a public university likely grew up there, want to stay there, all of that. Yeah. So it'll be a place that companies and recruiters can leverage to be able to hire this top talent. But then also we're working on helping empower them through helping them better articulate their transferable skills.
Yes, that was a missing component, a big missing component of that platform you're working on.
No, I was so excited about the event. I was taking you down that journey, and then I was like, and the secondary part, So we're working on all of that rolling out in the next month or two. We'll have like a beta test platform and then see where it goes.
Wow, that is so exciting. So how are you recruiting people for the platform? You just put something out, and how are you getting people to join you? Is this just by LinkedIn,
so there'll be a lot of means to do this, right? So our event, there's 2,000 collegiate female athletes in that small area that we're having this event at. That will be like our first demographic. Any collegiate female athletes, current or former, who also want to try, shout out, join. It's not live yet, but hopefully over the next month, that first initial platform will become live. So a lot of really great work happening in the space, and so much more still to do. But I think the importance of empowerment, right, that we've talked about so much across, our time together today, will be happening in this platform in a very unique way, right? Like, I want these athletes to feel like they're more seen and heard in their 5 minutes with my platform than they did in career services, because it gets them, it understands them, and it's built off of people who have experienced this. Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I am so proud of you for doing this. This is just, and again, empowering other women to actually have a career and not have that gap between their pays. Like you said, what, $2 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that said, I want to go back to something you said, talking about self-confidence. You mentioned you play the part. You actually went into character when you spoke about going into that room and asking that woman to mentor you. Mm-hmm. I love how you played that character. But the woman you are today, you're so powerful. You're so confident. How did you get there? What are some of the tools that help you get there? For someone listening to this, when you started, you were emotional, you're crying. Yeah. There's a lot going on, right? How did you work your way into the person you are right now? Because I see you as limitless and powerful.
I'm like, you're so nice. Maybe I'm just faking it better than I did 8 years ago or whatever it was. I think there's a lot of power in doing things. Okay. Right? I think we live in this world of all of our spare time spent on social media with instant gratification or watching this new TV show on Netflix or whatever the case may be, which is wonderful. It's great. But I also think there's this opportunity to leverage our spare time in many other ways, right? Yeah. I like you said, I've done pageantry, learned so much. I learned so much in pageantry that I never thought I would, whether it was how to actually interview appropriately and take someone on a journey while storytelling. I'm kind of a rambler, so that was also like the bad part of all of that, because I'm like, everyone wants the journey that I'm about to take them on, right? But I think, doing things allows you to learn and grow and develop in so many different ways. And I tell people this all the time. Your job's amazing, right? Like what you do that pays the bills is unbelievable.
Right.
But you will be a better employee if you have extracurriculars.
Yes.
If you're able to turn it off and you're able to learn things in other settings. And I feel that every single day, right? Like doing this passion project of HCA, her competitive advantage, and throwing an event for the first time and doing all of these things. First of all, I get to do it with two people I absolutely adore who are on my board, who are, oh my gosh, when we talk about powerhouse females, like these two, Jasmine and Bronwyn, are two of the most phenomenal people I've ever been able to work with. And in this safe space of like, hey, you're great at this, can you help me?
Right.
We talk about it all the time, how fun it is. Like we love what we're doing because one, we think it's going to change the world. We genuinely believe it's going to have an impact. And two, we're just learning so much every single day. So it's like doing things. And since I started this, passion project, if you will, I'm a 50 times better employee than I was when I started. Because all the things that I've learned when I don't have a parachute to save me, when I'm tech support, when I'm all these things, right? Like I have learned so much that I then apply to my work at Aristocrat that I have become exponentially better. And when I think about growth and development, if you expect all of your growth and development to happen in your 40 plus hours a week at work, you're missing the mark.
Right.
Like, what are you doing outside of what people are telling you to do?
Right.
To truly grow and develop. That's where the magic happens. That's where you can be fully vulnerable. That's where you can actually learn in such a different capacity and see parallels and see strategies and utilize information over here to plug it over there. And I think when I think about, what is my competitive advantage, right? Like that's what people ask me sometimes because I'm sports, right? Like, what do you think your competitive advantage is? And I really think my competitive advantage is just, I'm not afraid to shoot my shot.
Yeah.
And you know what? Not all of them go in. Right. And it sucks when they miss, right? Like, I don't like missing. I hate it. I hate failure. But I also learn a lot through it. And I think if we get to this place where what is actually the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
Most decisions we make are not irreversible. We can always pivot. So how do we shoot more shots?
Right.
Try to make them go in. Make sure they're good shots. I'm not saying like go shoot it from full court shot just for fun, but like shoot more good shots.
Yeah.
And see where they fall, because that's where you win games. That's where you learn. That's where you develop. And you're going to be a better employee because of it. When you turn your laptop off and you go snuggle with your kids at night.
Right.
When you make sure you don't miss their sporting events. You're a better person. You're a better employee. And your company will get a lot more value out of you.
Yeah. I just absolutely love that. My guest didn't show up for the last episode, so I did a solo. And I talked about that. When it comes to learning and development, it's so important because a lot of people learn organically from their leaders. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Yeah. Because you're picking up the good and the bad. Yeah. So pick up a book. There are so many podcasts out there. Yeah. And just 15 minutes a day. Just imagine 15 minutes a day. That's like growing 1% every day. By the end of the year, you would have grown over 300%. Yeah. So it's so important to be learning and to be growing and not looking. I also, one of the things to talk about is that I don't think the company is responsible for your personal development.
Agree. 100%.
Yeah, you are. And I learned that. Like, nobody's coming to say, hey, Sally, you should go take this course. No, Sally has to go ask, can I take this course? And will you pay for it? And if you don't, that's fine too. I'm still going to go take that course. Yeah. So I think it's so important.
I heard this metric that stuck with me reading a book, actually. So you can have the same year of experience 20 times. Yeah. You can have 20 years of experience. Or you can have 40 plus years of experience in a 20-year window. Yes. And so the choice is yours, how you want to handle your career and your development and your growth. Right. But nobody shows up to the Super Bowl and was like, I have no idea how I got here. I've never been to practice. I just fell into it like, hey, I'm here. I'll be quarterback, right? Like the people who play in the Super Bowl are the ones who show up every single day.
That's right.
When people are watching and when they're
And
not.
they're not watching. Wow, we just said that. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it also speaks to your personal ethics. And we were talking about self-confidence. When you do that, whether people are there or not, you're constantly growing yourself and you're constantly improving. That's what helps your self-confidence.
Yeah.
And that's where the growth comes.
Yeah.
Because we all know nothing grows in comfort zones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read this quote and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was like confidence is actually your ability to emotionally handle whatever the outcome is.
Yes.
Right? So
yeah.
and again, I probably butchered that. So maybe ask ChatGPT
really,
what it was.
really good.
But essentially what it means is that
Yeah.
when you realize that the worst thing that could happen probably isn't actually that bad, you become so much more confident, right? Like, I'm scared of speaking in public if that's your thing. What's the worst thing that happens? You suck? Okay, people talk about it for 5 minutes.
5 minutes and it's done.
Or they relate to you and are like, me too, I was so
bad at it. But what I tell people is when you're going through something like that, for example, I am going to speak and I'm not sure, like I'm going to be in front of 100 people. What's the worst that could happen? They stop right there. What's the worst that could happen? And that's where they stop.
Yeah.
So I walk people through the whole thing. So you went, you spoke, you stumbled, you froze. Then what happened?
Yeah.
So walking them through the whole process to the end, even to the healing process, makes them see like, okay, this is not so bad.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Most of our stress is actually derived from like what we unticked things, right? Like things that we haven't executed on. That's where all of our stress comes from.
Most of it, 70% of our stress come from the what ifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, take those what ifs, walk it all the way through. I've had a client who just told me, my mom's going to pass soon, and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. But they stop right there. So walking them all the way through, okay.
Yeah.
I feel better. I can handle this now because I have a plan.
Yeah.
But when you don't have a plan, it's okay to plan for if you're going to be successful, and it's okay to plan how you're going to handle mentally if you fail.
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
And I think the second part of that confidence piece that I would be really remiss not to mention is who is in your circle that's walking at your running pace.
Yes.
Right? Like, sorry, all the sports analogies. I like live in the sports world now, I feel like. But yeah, who's walking at your running pace in your circle? Because there is something really to be said about this refinement component.
Right.
That, like I said, Jasmine and Bronwyn, who I get to work with on her competitive advantage, every single day I'm refined by them.
Yes.
Every single day we work together, every single phone call I have with them, I am refined. And there is so much value in that, that I think if you don't have that, you need to go hunt for it, and you need to go find it, and you need to figure out what sets your soul on fire and find someone else who has that same passion and go run towards it. Yeah.
So I want to ask you one more question, and we all deal with this. How do you handle imposter syndrome? Because we know everybody feels it.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
So I'm probably not the best person to answer this not because I don't have imposter moments. I have them every single day. Mm-hmm. But I also am a compartmentalizer. So I put it in a nice box in the corner and I spend 0 minutes thinking about it because it doesn't solve anything, right? Like I don't worry about anything that I'm not doing something about. Like if I am going to spend my energy worrying about it, then I'm going to go do something to change it, right? And so I think that's where a lot of imposter syndromes like symptoms and syndromes and whatever come from, is this inability to, again, just do something, right? And understanding that every room you're in, you earned that. And then some. There's probably tons of other rooms you should be in that you're not quite in yet.
Right.
And, I think starting to see that value and being surrounded by people who see that in you when you can't is really, really, really important, right? There's been plenty of times where I've had to call someone and be like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I'm about to do this thing. Or even with my business, like startups are hard, okay?
Yes.
It's a passion project. It's super expensive. I'm paying for it because I'm passionate about it, because I think it will make a difference. And it's because of demographic I truly, truly care about. But startups are so hard. It's hard from a disparaged market perspective. It's hard from takeoffs and landings are always the hardest type of situation. And it's like, when you think about what the worst thing that could happen, right? Like I throw this event and no one shows up. okay,
Okay.
then
cool.
I plan another one and it's already a sunk cost. So unless
That's
I'm
right.
doing something to change this,
Right.
what is the point of worrying about, like, why waste 1 ounce of energy? We only have so much energy. It's a renewable source,
Right.
but we only have so much of it before it renews. And so to waste any of my mind power on how to solve something, worrying about it,
Yeah.
adds no value to my life. And, my uncle's so funny. He's like, I never really try to worry about anything, but this year I doubled down on it. And I was like, you know what?
I
I'm right
like
there with
that.
you. I'm doubling down
Yes.
on not worrying about things I can't control.
Yeah. I really like that. So if you're feeling it, do something about it.
Yeah.
Do something about it. So I used to, and one of the things I did about it was, especially when I'm in a room with like, professional women and CEOs, and I used to feel, what am I doing in this room? I don't belong in this room.
Yeah.
So before I get in the room, I would set my intentions. Why are you going into the room? What are you offering?
Yeah.
Right? And then I set my intentions. What are you taking from the room?
Yeah.
So I'm offering Sally. I'm bringing Sally just the way she is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to impress anyone. I'm not going to try to be important. I'm not trying anything. I'm bringing Sally, the author, the podcaster, and the mindset coach.
Yeah.
And what am I
Which
taking?
is incredible, by the way. Like,
Thank you.
yes, bring all of that.
Yeah. And what am I taking? There's some really educated, smart people in that room. I'm going to learn from them.
Yeah.
And I feel it's so important that before we walk into a room, even a boardroom, wherever, if we set our intentions and we say, what am I bringing? What am I taking? When you walk into that room, because your intentions are set, I feel that's the part like where you work on it, you do something about the imposter syndrome.
And I think you bring up such a great point. There's also people in that room that see all those things you're doing and can't even fathom how you did that. Right? Like there are just as many people as you're impressed by, there's that many people and more impressed by everything you're doing. And so I think when you realize that you have a secret sauce, there's a lot of power in that too.
And I hear when you're speaking, what words comes to mind? It's tenacity and grit.
Yeah.
I hear tenacity and grit because you can't do what you do without tenacity and grit.
Yeah.
You can't start a business and finish a book without tenacity and grit.
Yeah.
I cried on my first podcast. I was like, we did so many retakes because I'm like, I can't do this.
You're like, we're the Sally out. Wait, what's my name again?
Exactly. Exactly. That's how it went. But it's come a long way since then. But it takes. You're absolutely right. It just takes a lot of courage and grit to do what we do.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So with that, what's a takeaway for our audience today?
I was thinking a little bit when you told me when we started this that I was gonna have to answer something like this. I think I love quotes, so I'm gonna leave you with 2. One is either fire can either cook the food or burn the house down. So understanding your secret sauce and how you can leverage that in various situations to ensure you're like cooking the food and not burning the house down is super important, especially when we talk about these big skills like tenacity and grit or passion or whatever the case may be. But I think the overarching thing that I keep thinking about is yesterday's achievements never fulfill anyone's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to keep going.
Yeah.
You got to keep climbing for whatever purpose you feel, right? Like really figure out why you care about being successful.
Right.
And then stop at nothing to get there. But keep your family at the forefront of it all too, right? Like work really hard, show your kids and your family and your friends that you're all in for them, that you're all in every aspect of your life. And good things will happen, right?
Yeah, I love that. And if we were to sum it up into just one sentence, I'd say when you've reached that mountain, climb a bigger mountain.
Yeah.
And that's what builds tenacity. It builds grit. It builds self-confidence. And it also eliminates imposter syndrome when you keep climbing because you can see you're able to do it.
Yeah.
So with that, friends, today, thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing your wisdom. We really enjoyed that. And with that, friends, thank you and God bless.